it's just one of them things where like I don't know. I just wasn't really up to it. Just wasn't. I ain't really been up to really doing much. But
Oh, today.
yeah, I was just.
Oh,
I just.
just today.
But then I realized it don't. When it comes to talking about addiction, it don't matter about you really. I mean, it does, but it don't, because you need to be that voice for the one that is afraid to speak up.
So, Terrence Martin here with Martin Diamond Shores Media. I have my right hand man, Corbin Hopkins, and my man, Austin S. I'll keep it simple on that. I'm here with my main man, Daniel. Been friends for a while now, discussing addiction and mental health and a couple of stats. So, the main drugs out here of choice for Tennesseans is methamphetamines, crack cocaine, you got marijuana, and alcohol is the most common use. This is a big epidemic sweeping the country, and it's going from county to city to state. And now, my man right here has personally been involved with being addicted and kind of want to share his story. It's a very incredible story, so kind of want to share that and get a perspective from somebody who has actually been through it, and he can share his experience. I know a lot of people, it is absolutely detrimental to people's families that you have loved ones, you have friends that are addicted, that you're praying that they get help, and you don't want to see them overdose. In Tennessee alone, there was 3,826 that OD'd. You also have fentanyl right now. That's a big thing out in the street. So I want to get an experience and go over what Daniel's been through and let him share, how he grew up as a child, kind of middle of the road, how he got addicted and what he did to come off of it, and how his life has been afterwards. So with that said, Daniel Davis, pleasure being here. Thank you for coming. Kind of tell us what your childhood was like and where you grew up at.
I actually grew up not far down the road. Born and raised Loudon, Tennessee. I was born at Loudon Hospital. Actually was born a sick baby. It's crazy to think that later on I led on to crazier stuff. But I actually was born with a heart murmur, so I was in hospital for like three months, and then I later found out I was allergic to a lot of antibiotics. I have to have special antibiotics flown in, all that stuff. So as my childhood went, really I hate to say this, but I was around drugs from, I guess, birth. I mean, every single day, my dad, he smoked marijuana, drank alcohol. My mom, she worked in the bars growing up, so she was a barmaid all the time, so I would go in bars as a young age. Alcohol never really affected me like that. Never really liked alcohol. I didn't really care too much for it. Had a real bad alcoholic uncle, so alcohol I always just didn't care for. But I miss the life that I grew up in is not for the, I don't know, the weak-minded or anything. It was rough. It was growing up for me was my father. So my dad and my mom never got married. They split up when I was 5, and my mom. It was a good thing they split up because they would fist fight each other all the time, every day. So when they split up, my mom kind of went towards the party life, and my dad still stayed the whole. He was a worker. I was off, so he'd wake up. He'd go work 12, 16 hours a day, and that was him. He was just a hard worker. So when my mom left, my dad pretty much he stepped up, as you could say, being taking me in, but really can't really say he stepped up and became a father because he took me in, but we moved in with my grandmother, which was his mama, and that was where pretty much that's who I say raised me was my grandmother. God rest her soul, she's not here on this earth no more, but that is who I give all the glory to raising me. She taught me respect, ma'am, sir, all that. But for addiction wise, growing up, it started, I'm assuming, when my father decided that he was going to move on and meet somebody else, he met somebody. He was 33, and the girl he met at the time was 19. And she was actually me coming to my grandmother's house because so I was thinking my grandmother was, even though I give her all respect on raising me, she was probably one of the biggest drug dealers in Loudoun County. I hate to say it, but she dealt with a lot. She dealt. When my father met my stepmother, it was my stepmother was coming up there to buy pills from my grandmother, and that's how my dad met my stepmother. Well, when they met, we moved out of my grandmother's house. My dad got us a place in Loudon, and that's where we moved to. Well, of course, you meet a woman that's getting pills through your mom. What happens next? You start doing pills. I'm not saying that she made him do pills because it was all on his own. He chose to do, like, he chose to go that route. He chose to stop smoking marijuana and go to doing pills and everything. And this was around about 98, 99 area because my little brother wasn't born yet. And so when we moved to Loudon, that is that's when my father became real bad addicted to pills. He started, so I'm assuming, so 99 was when my little brother was born. In about 2001, when the whole opioid crisis with the Oxycontins come about, my father heard about it and heard about the whole going to Florida, driving down there, getting MRIs done. I don't know if you've ever heard of anything about that, but they would go down there with an MRI, take that scan in there to that doctor, and they would write them a slew of medications. I mean, they would write them Xanaxes, they would write them muscle relaxers called somas, they would write them opioids, oxycontins, roxicodone, all that stuff. I mean, they would give it all to them, and you would come back to the States or Tennessee, and my dad would do it to get pills to get high, but he would also do it to sell pills and make money, of course. Um, Him doing that, he was also, my dad was doing everything. My dad was also going to a methadone clinic, so he was actually doing both. He would go to the methadone clinic and then turn around and then go down to the pain clinics. It was crazy. He would do the methadone to get high every day and continue to work, but get the pills to sell and do all the other stuff with. So that's actually how I got introduced. I was building it up because that's actually how I got introduced to pills. When I was 17, I don't even think I was 18 yet. I remember I was a senior in high school. I was 18. I was a senior in high school, and my dad had came to me because, like I said, he was going to a methadone clinic and a pain clinic. So they started cracking down on all the rules. This was, about 8 years later or so. So they started cracking down on a lot of the rules. Well, a lot of them rules being that whatever you were getting from these doctors had to be in your system. So they would P test you, and you would have to have whatever they prescribed you in your system. Well, so with my father going to the methadone clinic, he could not have methadone in his system and also get pain relievers and opioids and stuff. So he come to me and was like, "Hey, will you take this?" It was a half a Roxette 15. I'll never forget it. Half a Roxycodone 15 milligram. It was a green pill. He was like, "Will you take this so it's in your system and pee in a cup so he could take it to the doctors and use my pee because it's in the pee. And that way you don't have to figure out a way to get, because they test pee, they make sure it's, real human urine and not from an animal, or it could be, from a pregnant lady or something. They test it to make sure it's, actually pee. And that was the start of pretty much me doing, because he gave me that half a pill, and we pretty much lived in a house where everybody come to, hang out with my dad, get high and do drugs. Well, one of them guys that he would get high and do drugs with was down at my house. When he gave me that half a pill, that guy showed me how to snort it. So when I snorted it, that was an awe moment. Like, it's hard to explain that first high that I got and I experienced. From what I grew up in to how that pill made me feel was above anything. It was the greatest thing I'd ever done at that time. The life that I lived in with the drugs and everything, and my father, he was real rough on me. He was abusive. I'm not gonna say it, and I'm not gonna lie, it was rough. He put hands on me all the time. It was rough growing up. So whenever I got high that first time, all that I dealt with, him yelling at me, all that rough growing up, all that stuff, that went away. It was all numb. I didn't deal with none of that stuff. So as I started to, we'll go a few months later, instead of, him giving me one, to have it in my system or whatever, I started to talk to him about letting me get more. So that way I could sell them and have my own money. Now, I am only in high school at this time. I was right at the end of my senior year. And honestly, I think it was pretty much probably at that time, he probably looked at me more of a friend than a son, because he would just give one to me. Like, I would ask for it, he would give it to me. So, like, every month, it became there about the last, I'd say about 3 months of high school. He would give me 30 Roxycodone 30 milligram pills every month. And then so he would tell me this is his father, I guess, advice on them, was I had to sell them and show him the money that I made so he would know that I wasn't doing them. So, but I played the system because I knew how my dad was, and I knew he would get really high on his drugs and pass out. So whatever drugs that I would get high on through the month, I'd wait till he passed out and go in there and steal his stuff, put it back in my stuff, so it still looked like I never done anything. So I know that's it's pretty rough, and it's pretty bad to say. You wait on your parents to pass out, you can go in there and rob them, but I mean, that's how I done it. And there at one time, right there at the end of high school, before I moved out, I had so much pills from where I'd steal from him, and I'd just save them back every month. There at the end, I knew I had to get out of that house or it was going to lead to destruction for me. So there at the end, when I had all that saved up, I start handing them out to everybody and friends, and we just start partying on them. But the day I graduated high school, I'll never forget it. The day I graduated high school, my older brother, come to me and was like, he's like, I'm tired of pretty much living this life. He's like, come live with me. So the day I graduated high school, I still had my cap and gown. I moved out and went and lived with my older brother. It was him trying to pull me out of that situation. He knew what I was doing. He knew what my dad done. He knew what everybody done in my family. So he was trying to pull me out of that situation. And really all it got me away from pills and everything, but that numbness that I felt from doing pills, I wanted that. I continued. I didn't want that to go away because all that pushed all that trauma, childhood trauma away. So I started to actually drink. And that's whenever like I said, I never did have a thing for alcohol, but that was whenever I couldn't get a hold of no pills or nothing or being around my brother. So I knew I could get a hold of alcohol because he was in his party days and he hung around a bunch of party people. Not that he gave me anything. I was of age, and I did everything on my own then. But I started to drink just to numb the pain of everything I've dealt with growing up. And that was about around age 18 to 19. And then after I actually enlisted in the military. At 19 in the Air Force, I enlisted in the Air Force, and I couldn't score high enough on the ASVAB to go into the job that I wanted. So I kind of got a little upset at myself and depressed, and I started drinking very heavily then. And then I don't know what made me decide this. I'm guessing it was my mom come back in my life and wanted to be around me all of a sudden. So I pretty much packed everything up for my brothers and moved with my mom in Chattanooga. And that was probably the worst thing to do because pills and my mom's, she was addicted to everything. I mean, whatever made her, I guess, numb is what she would do. And the big thing that she was actually doing around that time was crack. I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I done it one time. I hated the way it made you feel. I just didn't like none of it. And didn't like anything about it. And like I said, that was the demon for my mother. That was why pretty much my mom was never in my life. So of course I was against it completely. But it actually, so for her to get off of the crack during that time, it's whenever they started getting real heavy on methadone. And methadone was used as a detox drug to keep people from using other drugs, or it was a blocker. They say it was so you couldn't get high on other drugs. You could still get high on other drugs. It would about make you sick. It would about make you sick to your stomach. When my mom got on methadone and that I lived at that time around her, that was whenever I would, dabble in she'd give me methadone anytime I asked for it. Like I said, anytime I was around any of my parents, I could get whatever I wanted from them. They never really was a parent to me. It was more best friend status, pretty much all my whole growing up time. So it was, I'm assuming that was when my addiction took off, like went out of control. When I lived with her, and I'd go to parties down there, and her friends would give me hydrocodone and Vicodin all the time, and those were never sufficient enough for me because those would block that pain away, but not nearly long enough like what my dad used to give me. So I would always be on the look for them, searching. I would be on drug deals or whatever it may be to look for that oxycodone. As I lived with my mom through them years, it was real rocky with her. We would always fight, of course. In addiction, misery loves company. So us both doing drugs, it was just never a good thing. We were always fighting or something. So I ended up moving away from her and moving back to my dad's. And this was probably around 2012, 2013 area. It's about 22, 23. I moved back, lived with my dad, and I got a job. I tried to start doing the right thing, I guess, even though I was still getting high. I tried doing, I guess, more of being a responsible adult somewhat. And moving back with him was not the best answer for anything. Because I did get a job, and that job I worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It wasn't with them. It was somebody. It was a seat factory out in Baltimore, and to keep up with them hours, of course, I started looking to do more drugs, more pills. And my dad, of course, still going to all these doctors. He still got what he got, so I knew I could go to him and get whatever I want. And it was spiraled, of course, out of control again with him, me living with him. My stepmom and him finally split up. They went their separate ways. Me and him moved to Knoxville and actually lived 2 blocks from probably one of the worst hoods in Knox County. Yeah. And that being Western Heights. I'm sure you know. Western Heights is a real bad neighborhood. And I actually lived 2 blocks down from it. And I decided one day I was going to go walking out there. And I was still in addiction and stuff, and ran across some guy, and he, next thing you know, I'm getting recruited in to sell crack in Western Heights. And it was just like that. I didn't stick around because, like I said, I always had a thing against crack. I always hated it. Wouldn't really catch me around it. So I was able to pull myself away from that situation pretty fast. And, of course, go back to doing pills again. But, so, during that time, I lived with my dad in Knoxville, like I said, and he was still in addiction. He ended up losing his place to stay in Knoxville. So me and him packed things up and decided to go move with his buddy that lived off in Strawberry Plains, out past Knoxville. And we actually, my addiction went down, and it went really out of control then. And that's whenever I got introduced to the needle. And I got introduced to shooting dope. And I never did shoot heroin or nothing, but I did shoot meth. And that was when I shot methamphetamines. That was, honestly, I'd say that was better than sex at the time. It was you couldn't explain it. The feeling, the euphoric feeling that it gave you. And that, for 2 years, I done that. And it was really bad. Really, like, my teeth started falling out, everything. Like, within like 2 years, all this started happening. And then at the end of that 2 years, it was a big ordeal at the house I stayed at. And it was another drug house, party house. Something happened with my father and the owner of the property. They got into a big fight, and I was one to not let my dad get beat up in front of me, so I stepped in the fight too, and they ended up turning on me, and my dad just sat there and watched them and didn't do nothing. And that was the moment that I realized he didn't care about nobody but himself. That was like my aha moment for my father to get away from him. But after that fight, I woke up in the ambulance. Yeah, I don't barely remember what happened. It was, I think I got hit with they said a jack handle or something. And I guess from where I tried to block it, it broke my funny bone. Yeah, and that is some of the worst pain you'll ever feel. And when I woke up in the ambulance, I don't know if they thought I was overdosing or if I was I really don't remember it. I was in and out of consciousness. I could barely remember anything. I went to a hospital off, whatever the hospital is off Broadway in Knoxville, up around Fulton High School and stuff. I went to a hospital around there. Um, the hospital released me, and I walked. When the hospital released me, I didn't have nothing but the clothes on my back, didn't even have shoes on. I actually walked into the Walgreens next door, stole a pair of shoes, and walked myself down to the mission and went to the homeless shelter. And that was I was 27 at the time. So that'd been 2017. And so I was homeless. In the time being homeless, I was homeless for about 4 months, 4 to 5 months. I was in downtown Knoxville, under the bridge. I didn't live under the bridge because that was a place that was actually you didn't walk through at sundown. You did not walk through underneath that bridge. That was just a no. A lot of bad things happened there. So I slept on a porch of an old abandoned building. It had a covered porch and stuff on it, and I slept there for about 4 months. Mm. Then one day we had this lady come through, and they had a bunch of floods that went on down in Houston, Texas. A bunch of floods that wiped out Houston, and it was actually FEMA. FEMA come through and was asking all the homeless people pretty much if they wanted to load up and go work for FEMA at like $12 an hour in Houston, Texas. They'd pay for everything. Well, of course, I'm homeless, don't have a job, so of course I go. And I was still in addiction at the time. I was doing what they call Subutex. It's just another form of Suboxone, which Subutex was a type of drug that you could. It was a detox drug, but it didn't have that blocker in it, so you can mix it with other drugs and just get 10 times higher. So I was on that Subutex, as a detox drug. I was still doing other shit, but excuse my language. I was on the trip down when FEMA picked us up and sent us to Houston, Texas. I decided then that I was done with the pills. I was going to stop everything, because which couldn't really get. I knew once I got to Texas, I wasn't going to be able to get my hands on any pills or anything. So I did. I stopped the Suboxone and Subutex and all that, and that's when I realized that all this that the government tells you, like they send you to rehab and they put you on this Suboxone and this Subutex, it was the worst drug to ever come off of. The worst drug. I would come off heroin, meth. I would come off any other drug than Suboxone or Subutex. I went through 63 days of withdrawals coming off of that stuff. 63 days. That was about 40 days of wanting to rip my arms and legs off my body, and about another 2 weeks of insomnia. Just not really sleeping. And at that time, I don't know if I want this in the video or anything, but at that time, the only thing that was keeping me probably alive was marijuana, because it would give me an appetite and I would eat or drink or do something. And it was not saying go out there and this is what you need to do to get off drugs, but at the time, that was what was helping me get through. But then all it did was, when I was in Texas, I went through all that withdrawal, and I was down there in Texas and I was working. That's whenever I got introduced to meth. Like, well, up here meth is a little bit different. Down in Texas, we were 200 miles from the border. So the meth that you get there is probably 90% pure to the meth that you get up here. It's like 50% pure. It's been stepped on so many times, waking its way up. So down there, when I was doing meth, it was real bad. I got to where I was hallucinating. I was, thinking cars were popping out with guns like Transformers and like shoot me. It was because it was so strong of meth down there, and I was doing so much of it. I would go, a week or two, not sleeping or nothing. I would go awake the whole time.
Mm.
And when I was in Texas, that was whenever I guess I hit my rock bottom finally. You think being homeless would be your rock bottom, but no, it wasn't for me. I had to go to Texas and do all this other stuff to find out, rock bottom actually had a basement.
Right.
And that was where I was at then. And I got put in a pretty much a mental hospital from where I was up for so long and doing all that math, and I was freaking out. And they had put me in the security level of the hospital where I had a security guard and everything watching. And after about 3 days of it, I finally, I guess, was started to come to, and really I broke down. I finally broke down. And that was the moment that pretty much I told myself I couldn't do this no more by myself. Like, I needed help. And the only person I could turn to was God. Didn't have nobody else. Nobody wanted to be there for me. So I turned to God. And I still get chills thinking about it to this day. But whenever I decided that I was going to turn my life to God and quit with all this, little things started going on. Like that day, the nurse came in there to take my vitals, and the light had come on above my bed. And she's like, well, that ain't supposed to be on. And she hit the button to turn it off, and it didn't turn off.
Well, that was like the moment where I was like, somebody's listening, I can't really say who it is, but somebody's out there listening to me. And well, then the next day, the private hospital that I was at, 3 nurses wanted to become, I'm pretty sure it was 3 nurses. They wanted to be anonymous, had put money together for me for a bus ticket back to Knoxville from Texas. And that was like a $550 ticket. It's a 19-hour bus ride back to Knoxville. So that next day, they gave me that. They actually gave me some cash to go on the bus ride with me, and got on the bus, and I had spoken to my mother before I got on the bus, because that was the only person that I knew that would answer if I called. And she was actually living in a halfway house when I called her. And that was like surprised me, because my mom never got sober for anything. So that's whenever I was on the bus ride back to Knoxville, and I had turned, started praying more. I started, trying to talk to God about help me with this journey I'm about to embark on. I had met a few people on my ways, and one of them, I met a couple that were I met them in Atlanta, and they were going from Atlanta to somewhere in Knoxville. I don't know exactly where, but I had met them, and it was almost like, I don't know, God had put these people in my life for a reason. It was just the conversations I had with them, it made me realize that there is still a lot of good in this world. It's not all about drugs, what I thought it was all about. And whenever we made it back to Knoxville, my mom was there waiting for me, and she had contacted so where she was staying in a halfway house, she was staying in the woman's part. Well, there was a male side of it, so she had contacted the owner of it and asked if pretty much if he could make room. I didn't have no money, or she didn't have no money to give me to start out with. It was just pretty much if he had a bed open for me to where I could come and stay. And he said no, that he didn't have nothing. And so my mom was like trying to find another place for me to go. And that guy actually called back. And his name was Jody Reno. And he had actually went to school with my parents, my mom and my dad. And felt like that it was heavy on his heart to help me, because he had went to school with my parents and he kind of knew how they were growing up. So he just felt it heavy on his heart to help me. Well, so when I got off that bus, she picked me up and she took me to his halfway house. And it was actually in Alcoa at, it was a private one, and he called it Baby Ray's Recovery Home. It was over on East Lincoln, over in Alcoa. It was actually, what it was he took houses that were part of the drug scene, crack scene, whatever it was in Alcoa, and he would take these homes and flip them. He would go in there and restore them, redo the houses, and then he would turn around and turn it into a halfway house to help other people. He actually had 3 of them. And the other one was on Rural Street, and then he had another one, I couldn't exactly where it was at, but it's close to downtown Maryville. But when I got there to that halfway house, he really didn't have a bed. He gave me his couch to sleep on until a bed came available. He knew that there was a bed about to come available, so that's why he pretty much said I could go ahead and come in. When I got there at the halfway house, it was almost like another path that God was setting me in front of. Is like, this is the path I'm wanting you to choose now. Like, you've turned to me, so now I'm wanting you to go this path. When I went to Baby Ray's, it was actually very religious oriented. The halfway house was. He was all about wanting you to get that relationship with God. Pretty much turning your worries over to someone else to take on your worries. Well, when I was there, that was January 6th, 2018 is when I got to the halfway house. A lot of people say that's your clean date. Everybody's like, that's whenever you should consider yourself clean. And actually, I consider myself clean and sober on January 11th, which is actually the day I got saved. So that is the day that I feel like that was completely started over, a new person. And the day I got saved, it was actually during a live stream church of Rio Revolution over in Maryville. It was one of them moments to where I honestly felt the presence of God. I really did. It was a moment that someone told me it's kind of like a heart circumcision. You're turning over your heart to God. That day I walked to the altar during that, the day I walked to the altar to get saved, there was about 100 other guys that come behind me. And that was like one of them moments, I was almost helping others already, not even knowing really that I was being helped myself,
Right.
And that was when I gave my life over to God. It changed my world completely. It did. After I stayed in the halfway house for about 3 months, and then I learned about another halfway house over the hill, because it was called New Opportunities. And it was more about the first halfway house I was in. It was more about getting that relationship with God and learning the new way of living with God in your life. Well, then the next halfway house I went to was more about teaching you responsibilities again. Like we had bills we had to pay every week. We had what you would call fines, like you would get charged fines, you know, just say walking through the neighbor's yard. That was like a fine that you'd have to pay, you know. Just it was more about helping you establish rules in your life because you need structure, and that's what they were kind of helping you teach. I went there, I stayed in there for about another 3 to 4 months, and one of my roommates that I was in there with, me and him was really close. He was like, hey, you know, have you ever thought about moving out on your own? And I was like, yeah, you know, I just can't really do it in today's society, living on your own. It's very hard, especially I just started working at Denso, and it was like $11 an hour. So you're barely making it. So me and him decided to get a place together. And we got a little townhouse apartment over in Louisville, and we started there. And in the beginning, it was like kind of like a frat house, really. It was just us, me and him, and like 3 other roommates. But then we started to realize that we can't really do that because, like, me and my roommate, my best friend Tyler, we were accountable for each other in a lot of things. And then when we started bringing other people in the house, it just started, like, they would go out and drink and stuff and think it would be okay to be around us, and that we knew it was bad. So we, you know, told them, you know, we loved them as brothers, but they had to go. And we got them to move out, and after they moved out, me and Tyler did great together. Like, we both still worked and everything. I guess it got to the point where it was time for maybe us to find a relationship, you know, find that, you know, that comfort in somebody else. And he started dating this girl, and he kind of went off and did his own thing. And then I met my now wife. She was actually, what's crazy about it, she was actually part of the women's house in the halfway house I was in. But men and women couldn't, you know, fraternize together. It's kind of frowned upon. So you couldn't really speak to each other while we were in there. She had worked at a cell phone store. My roommate at the time needed his phone fixed, and we went to the first phone store and she wasn't there. And we went to the second one. Someone was there, and it actually was. When I met her, when I saw her, I was like, you know, I think I felt my best friend finally, type deal. And she was in recovery just like I was, and I was always scared about having a relationship with someone else that was an addict too. It was always scared me because I was like, you know, I don't feel like they will ever make it because they're going to end up getting high together. But actually, it's turned out to be the best things that ever happened to me because, for one, we never got high together in addiction. That was the great thing. You know, we lived 2 separate lives. But when we finally met and got together, I found my life partner that wanted to walk this spiritual life with me, stay sober, and accomplish goals in life. And that's what pretty much when we got together, we sat down and we worked. We were like, this is what we want out of life. This is what we're going to do, and this is our time frame to do it. And that's what happened. And we worked hard. We fixed our credit together. We saved up enough money, got an awesome realtor, being Terence Martin, and we actually was able to go buy a house. And that was the biggest moment for me, knowing that 7 years prior to me closing on this house, I lived underneath the bridge in downtown Knoxville, homeless, no shoes on my feet, you know. And now, 7 years later, me and my wife are closing on a $320,000 house. Like, that's unheard of. That don't ever happen, you know. And that's all for me, how it worked for me was getting that relationship with God, turning my worries over to somebody else, walking a straight path, trying to help others, and just doing the right thing. And the rest of it, the addiction and all that, as the years passed, it got easier and easier and easier. You know, after they say for every year you used, let's see, how's it work? For every, can't remember how the saying goes, for every year you used, it takes that same amount of time for your brain to go back to normal, as they say, go back to producing your normal amounts of dopamine other than what you used to use, because when you use a dope, that's what, you know, it releases all that dopamine, that's what you're chasing. That, after all that, after the years went by, you know, 2 to 3 years, I choose not to be in rooms with other addicts, but if I happen to be in a room with an addict or someone using drugs or someone doing drugs, it don't bother me not one bit. I mean, I might try to help them, be like, hey, you shouldn't do that, you know, be like, I know a better way, you know. I'm not going to waste my time with you. I'm not going to sit here and beg you to do it. You know, I've learned that in addiction, you know, you have to be somewhat selfish. You know, you have to be focused on yourself a lot. You also have to help others too. But doing that, you don't need to go so far that it ruins your good walk that you're doing. That being said, that's one of the hardest things that I do now. And that is, you know, like I said, 7 years ago, my mom was there for me waiting to get off that bus, and she helped me get into a halfway house. You know, 7 years later, now I deal with her in addiction all the time. And she won't take that clear path. And I've tried with her, and now I'm to the point with her that I've pretty much washed my hands with it. I will love her, and I will love her at a distance. You know, she's already went through, she's been homeless, and she won't change, and I don't know why she won't change, you know, and it's one of the hardest things I have to do is knowing that, telling my mom, you know, no, she can't come live with me because I know it's going to hurt my walk in life, but telling her no, knowing that when I say no, she's going to be homeless and probably back out there on drugs and everything. But then again, that's when you have to be kind of selfish. And I've learned, speaking with other people and in addiction and everything, that you can't beat yourself up for it. You have to set them boundaries, even if it is with your mother or your father. You have to set them boundaries with everything. And now that's how I continue with being sober with everything, is continue to choose the right path, even whenever days get hard. I mean, no one has a perfect life, and it's going to get rough. Everything's work life, home life. I mean, but actually, I enjoy it so much now that my worst day sober is 10 times better than my best day high. So if that helps you kind of speculation on addiction.